What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's dive into a little thing called the mailbag at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your question answered right here on the podcast. Start with Joey. So he's a big fan. Like this guy. Are the Titans playing up how much they like Ward to try and entice the Giants to give a haul for the pick? I don't understand how the Titans don't trade back and gain the Giants' first-round pick next year. In all likelihood, it would probably be a top 3 pick. They could still get a higher-end starter and possibly have 2 top 5 picks next season. Cam Ward wouldn't even have been a top 4 quarterback prospect in last year's class. I don't get why they don't budge. Well, I think that assumes that the Giants would trade next year's 1 to move up 2 spots. And I don't know if they would. So, like, anytime that we assume a trade, it takes 2 to tango, right? You can dance by yourself, but you usually need a partner. And I think in this situation, like, I think that if the Giants traded their 2026 first-round pick to get up, I think that would be insane. So I think part of the Titans just need a quarterback. And the betting markets, like, I don't think they're playing it up. Like, they're going to draft Cam Ward. Cam Ward is going to be their pick. I'm heading to Scottsdale for a basketball tourney this weekend. What's the name of the par 3 course that does night golf? It's called the Grass Clippings. The Grass Clippings. Never been, but everyone swears by it, so enjoy. Alex. The definition of insanity, I don't even need to read this, is doing the same thing over and over. The NFL has given us one gem, Darnold taking Geno Smith's job yet again, with 2 more in the wings. Rodgers pulling a Favre, and Russell Wilson going to make Kenny Pickett rethink being a starter. Do you believe that either of these scenarios are going to happen? And if they do you see them working out? I think I could see Geno just playing like Geno Smith. He's just solid. I think Sam Darnold could be pretty hit or miss. I'm rooting for the guy, but I think it's going to be pretty difficult given how bad their offensive line is, and they just got rid of DK. I think Rodgers and Russell are done. Like, it's over. I mean, Russell, I don't even think Russell's a lock to have a job. It would not shock me if nobody signs him. He's like toxic. His approval rating, not good. So I have a theory that the recent success of tough running teams like Detroit and Philly is a direct reflection and consequence of the spread offense. Over the last 15 to 20 years, teams now have smaller and quicker wide receivers and tight ends that are offensive weapons in order to effectively run the spread because it's so focused on spreading you out than taking advantage of the space that's created by getting their super quick, extremely agile, small players in a spot on the field where there's open space for them to use their skill. As a result of that, defenses now have players that can match up with these twitchy wide receivers and chase them all over the field, thus putting them at a disadvantage when they play teams like Philly that have big lines and big running backs and big tight ends that can hammer the old school running game because modern defenses, primarily linebackers, are not equipped to defend that type of offense. If more teams now start to copy Philly or Detroit in the run game, do you think we will see defenses rebuild themselves in order to get bigger linebackers? Well, those linebackers don't exist. Like, when I was growing up, most linebackers weighed 250, 260, 270 pounds. And their job was to meet guys like Lorenzo Neal in the hole and get in a one-on-one. Guys like Ray Lewis, people questioned him coming out in the draft because he weighed like 230 pounds. Now, obviously, as he got older, he got bigger. But Ray Lewis, the way he played in college, 225, 230, 235 pound linebackers that can play in space are what everyone wants. So you go, could it shift the other way? Those players don't exist in college. There aren't middle linebackers that look like Ken Norton Jr., that look like, those type linebackers that fill the hole. Gerard Mayo, or I guess Brandon Spikes was more that guy. Like those type players that, probably 10 years ago were slowly phased out and considered two down players, which is stupid, line now because like two down players just meant on first and second down when people run the ball. Well, people pass it all the time on first down. It's why you need versatile linebackers, guys that can run and play in space. Even the best linebackers in the league, Roquan Smith and Fred Warner, would not be considered like stack and shed taking on guards and centers in the hole. That is not what they do. So I just think the player has changed. The game has changed a lot, but so like the way college football, they don't exist. It's why it's hard to find offensive linemen in the draft now because there aren't like these teams like Iowa and what Alabama used to do in the first, half of the Saban era. It was easy to find guards and centers that would translate to the way people played in the NFL. It is much more difficult because everyone is running the spread offense. It's why the NFL has added a lot of those concepts to the offense. Lane Johnson is 35 years old. He's a throwback player. Jordan Mailata, they got pretty lucky finding him in Australia. Landon Dickerson's an Alabama guy. So I think it's difficult to find those type players. I think it's easy to go, yeah, just find Jordan Mailata and Panay Sewell. It's like, well, yeah, I would love to, but it's easier said than done. I think you're not crazy for your theory, but I think it's harder to transition to what you're talking about. Question for the mailbag. Explain to me, if a college team has many players from the NIL, does that mean you have more scholarship spots on the team? If so, wouldn't that be the way to go? I don't think the NIL has anything to do with scholarships. The scholarships are paid by the school. You get, in college football, you get 85. So I get to place of my 100-man roster, 85 of those guys are on a full scholarship, meaning they don't pay to go to school and meaning they get a housing stipend. But the NIL is what in theory, I pay for your name, image, and likeness, but it's essentially just paying you to play. So the NIL has nothing to do with scholarships. Absolutely nothing. When it comes to college basketball and March Mania, one thing is for sure, nothing's for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderellas, top seeds going home early, it's all gonna happen. Bet the unexpected. Every upset, every day with DraftKings Sportsbook. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. Ready to make your first bet? Check out matchups and pick a team to win. It's that simple. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN, that's J-O-H-N. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Thanks for the ride. Question for the mailbag. As I see the most recent Kevin Durant drama with the talented reporter Ramona Shelburne, do you see comparisons to KD and Aaron Rodgers, two all-time greats, but seem to do their own way, seem to do it their own way, and their back half of their careers have fizzled, bouncing from team to team? What's funny is I didn't see, did Ramona and Kevin get into it? One thing they have in common, and I'll use myself as an example. Most people in my life, I would say over the course of the last 5, 6 years, are married and now have children. And their lives, as up until a couple years ago, I was pretty single. In my life compared to that other person's life, even if we're both 34, if I'm 34 and you're 34 and we both own a home, but you have a wife and you have a young child and I have none of that, our lives don't parallel each other at all. I can do whatever the you know what I want. And I do. Where that human being has not only has responsibility with a child, but their life revolves around other people. And as someone who obviously just got married and who's lived with someone for a couple years, you realize your life is completely different than it once was. It doesn't mean I don't get to still go play golf and still do things I want to do. And that'll be the same when I have a child. But it is no longer 100% I dictate the terms of literally everything I want to do. And I'd argue my life is much more complete now that I have someone else in it. And hopefully, if my swimmers swim, we have children here soon, it'll even get better. Even if it becomes in ways more difficult and more challenging. But like my life actually has more in common with most people, right? So Aaron Rodgers and Kevin Durant, Aaron Rodgers 41 years old. Most of the quarterbacks in the NFL, Tom Brady was married and had kids. Peyton Manning married and had kids. Drew Brees married and had kids. Fucking Roethlisberger married and have kids. Their lives, in a weird way, all have way more in common than Rodgers, who can just do whatever he wants whenever he wants. Like that, you become a little abnormal, especially like at his position. Like most quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes married, Josh Allen engaged, Herbert no clue. Uh, Looks like Jalen Hurts serious relationship, Jared Goff married. I don't think they had a baby yet, but kid on the way. She's pregnant. I mean, that's Aaron Rodgers is single at 41, never been married. Like I wouldn't like I would have pushed back against this for a long time, but like I don't know, man. Kevin Durant, look at the best players in the NBA. LeBron, married, multiple kids. Steph Curry, married, 5 kids. Giannis, married, kids. Jokic, no clue. But it's like you're 38 years old. The other thing is, I was single. I wasn't a millionaire by any means. Had enough money, but not enough to do whatever I want. Imagine being single and that rich. It would probably fuck with you. And it'd be one thing if you're like divorced or whatever, never been married, always been single, can just do whatever you want. It's kind of a weird life. Honestly, one thing as I got older, like you just want, like, there's just more to life than just it being about you. And my profession revolves a lot. Like the podcast is all about me. It just, most of our industries is about you trying to be ambitious. And it's just like, there's more to life than that. So I think that's where they really parallel each other. It's just no one else that is dependent on them in their life being a wife or a child, where basically all their peers have that. Hi, John, Ravens fan. How scary are the Browns going into next season now that they traded for a Super Bowl champ? I think he's talking about Kenny Pickett. Seriously, though, how stupid are the Browns not only traded a second day pick to the Eagles for Kenny Pickett, but they also traded their own quarterback to the Eagles for Kenny, who is arguably better than Pickett. Uh, yeah, man, I didn't even see what was the Kenny Pickett trade. I didn't even see the trade. I mean, I know they got traded. So the Eagles announced they have agreed to trade Kenny Pickett to the Browns for DTR and a fifth round pick. Yeah, I don't know. I no comment. I just think I think Kenny Pickett. I would not want him on my team. There are certain players like, yeah, he's going to be in the NFL. I would not want him on my team. So there are guys like this in the draft. It's like, listen, this guy's going to get drafted in like the second round or the third round. I don't want this guy on my team. Not because I don't like. I agree he can play, but I don't want this guy on my team. And Kenny Pickett has nothing like character wise. I'm just talking the player. I think he's terrible. And DTR is much more, Jalen under that umbrella of like being able to move. I don't understand the Bengals letting Hendrickson seek a trade while keeping Chase and Higgins. Their defense was terrible, and Hendrickson was the league leader in sacks. Wouldn't the smartest thing to do would be to extend Chase and Hendrickson and trade Higgins? I feel teams have gotten too cute when making decisions. In what world do you let the leading sack leader, why can't I fucking read? Go. Just go to another, just to keep another wide receiver. Higgins, who is a great player and probably a number one somewhere else, but you already have Chase and need a defense at the end of the day. Hey, I'm a Ravens fan, so it doesn't bother me. But why do you think teams make these decisions so hard? Well, I saw a quote from Jamar Chase. They must have had their press conference today saying like we owe Joe Burrow a debt of gratitude. Him speaking about this had a huge influence, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. So the reason they extended those two guys is Joe Burrow because it's not the right football move. Even if you could keep all three, you wouldn't want to keep all three. You'd keep the pass rusher and you'd keep the star wide receiver, and you'd flip the other guy for a second or third round pick. And instead of paying your second wide receiver $29 million, you would draft a wide receiver in the second or third round. Hell, maybe draft both a receiver in the second and the third and let the cream rise and pay those guys a combined $2 million. So it's a bad move. I mean, from a football standpoint, in a vacuum. Now, when you factor in their variables of Joe Burrow, I get it. And that's why they did it. Their star quarterback. With Joe Shane and Brian Daboll fighting for their jobs, should they consider trading for a guy like Joe Milton? The Giants have been involved in a lot of trades, signing talks for quarterbacks like Stafford, Rodgers, and Wilson. It leads me to think they aren't super high on Shedeur Sanders. If they aren't high on Sanders and can't land somebody like Rodgers, who else could you find to excite the fan base? Listen, Giants are fucked. It's over. And I get John Mara not wanting to fire these guys because he doesn't want to look like some loony owner. He should have blown up the place. He should have thrown a bunch of gasoline all over and lit a match. But he was hesitant to do that because he doesn't want to look like Al Davis or something. But like the reason you're firing all these people is because they're bad at their jobs. They're bad at their jobs. Joe Shane is completely in over his head. Maybe Dayball's a solid offensive mind, but as a head coach, I don't know, man. It ain't working. Broncos fan, I'm curious how you feel about the Broncos free agency picks so far. Hufanga and Greenlaw are dogs, but they tend to be injured. Also curious your thoughts on Evan Ingram. I like him, but I feel like we could have gotten a sweet tight end in the draft. I don't think signing any of those guys limits anything you guys do in the draft. I would 100% expect you guys to draft the tight end. I what was Ingram's numbers last year? He got banged up. He had a bad season. He played 9 games, 47 catches, 1 touchdown. Previous year, he was unreal. We had 114 catches, and he only averaged 8 yards a catch. To me, Evan Ingram at this point is like, you just signed him because he's a good player, and if he can give you 50, 60 catches, you're in good shape. But like that has zero impact. And I mean zero impact on you guys signing, or excuse me, drafting a tight end. I would be stunned if you guys don't draft a tight end and a running back with two of your first four picks. Are the Bengals serious signing Higgins and Chase just to make Burrow happy? But at what sacrifice? Losing defensive players and maxing out their cap on 3 offensive guys? Does this make sense to you? Like I said, man, our experiences shape our decisions as we move on in life. Carson Palmer quit on them. He said, I would rather retire than play for you. When he left a couple years later, he was leading the Arizona Cardinals to the NFC Championship game. The Arizona Cardinals, who are a joke franchise. So, like, they've had experience with a superstar quarterback that got really weird and really ugly. And Burrow started making some comments like, listen, I'm not trying to play GM here, but we should keep these guys. I want to keep these guys. And Carson had made some comments like, I was promised some things and it didn't come through and it pissed him off and he quit on him. So if Carson Palmer hadn't existed for the Cincinnati Bengals, do I think that they re signed T. Higgins as well? I don't. But like they went through that experience. That would rattle me too if I was Mike Brown. What if I didn't? And then next year, Joe Burrow's like, I want out. It's just a weird situation that, yeah, is it an ideal team building exercise to pay two wide receivers that much money? No, it's not. Because the move, I think we all agree, is to pay Chase, who is unreal, and flip Higgins. But Joe Burrow didn't really allow that. Now you could argue, like, Joe, like, should you be chiming in? And that's a fair question to ask. But Joe would be like, well, I just threw 45 touchdowns. My fucking team let me down. He's not wrong. It's like, well, yeah, they let you down because of the defense. Do you think the Chargers should trade up to get Ashton Jeanty? Can I just say this? I love the WAC, which is now the Mountain West. I root for kids from those programs, specifically Fresno, Boise, San Diego State. So I celebrate those players. And Jeanty was, his numbers are jaw dropping. He was awesome this year. I mean, he looked like Barry Sanders meets like Walter Payton. But doing that in the Mountain West is a lot different than doing that in the SEC or the Big Ten. And he's 5'8". So I think sometimes when we're critical, like this is the draft. And I think sometimes you have to have conversations of like, not everyone is Barry Sanders. Not everybody is Aaron Rodgers. And when you're talking about a guy, I mean, people talk about Ashton Jeanty going in the top 10. He's 5'8" and he played in the Mountain West. Honestly, I think drafting Ashton Jeanty in like the top 15 picks is kind of insane. Mainly because there are a ton of running backs in this draft. You are going to get a starter if you draft a guy in the second round. I promise you. And for the hype on Ashton Jeanty, if I'm taking a guy high, Saquon Barkley, freak talent, did it at Penn State. Christian McCaffrey, Pac 12, dominated, freak talent. Bijan Robinson, Texas. I do think there's a lot of risk involved. 5'8", Boise State. And when I say risk involved, not that he won't be a good player in the NFL. When you're drafting him really high, you're expecting Pro Bowls, All Star. I'm not as convinced. If you tell me Ashton Jeanty never makes a Pro Bowl, like I think that's believable. If you tell me he's not the best running back in this class, I think that's believable. Like that, Saquon Barkley was going to be a star if he just got with a decent team. Christian McCaffrey was a fucking freak. Bijan Robinson was probably the biggest freak out of those three. I love Jameer Gibbs, but like there was some risk involved. But look at where he gets to go with an unreal loaded offense with a great offensive line. Like the Cowboys cannot draft Ashton Jeanty. The Bears, like I think those picks would be crazy. And I like Ashton Jeanty. To me, he's like a pick in the 20s. Now I understand he benefits because he's such a great player in a class that doesn't have a lot of high end players. But I would have a hard time as a GM or a coach drafting a guy that was 5'8", really, really high, in a league full of just freakazoids. Hey, John, I'd like to suggest Myles Garrett be on the next Fugazi Friday. He said in the press conference recently, I think the fans will know my heart's in the right place. It's never been about the money. It's always been about winning. That's got to be one of the most disingenuous things I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, man, I just think it's at this point in time, like we all know the truth. Um, they and I give Jimmy Haslam credit when he's like, Myles Garrett asked for a meeting with Jimmy Haslam, and then Jimmy Haslam was like, I'm not meeting with you. Meet with my GM, who I don't know runs the football team. And then, of course, Clutch immediately leaks out that Jimmy Haslam wouldn't meet with him. Of course he wouldn't. His fucking job's the GM. We don't plan on trading you. And then Jimmy Haslam gave him whatever, $130 million, and Miles took it. So yeah, it's just Myles Garrett, his desire to win could be bought. And it was. And I don't blame him. We all got a price, and he just got. Now he was already 100 worth of millions of dollars, but they paid essentially quote, shut him up, and it worked. It's crazy the power of cash. It's very very powerful, and depending on who you're dealing with, numbers could be bigger or smaller. What do you think of the idea of the Colts drafting a quarterback in the second round? Steichen saw firsthand how basically it saved the Eagles as one primarily credited with the development of Hurts. I could see him being up for it, trying it again if he has lost faith in Anthony Richardson. I know they signed DJ for this year, but I don't really have much faith in him either at this point. Don't blame you. I get that they have other needs, but if the other two quarterbacks are as bad as they have historically been, putting Milroe or Riley Leonard in for the latter part of the season and having them look decent seems like it would be a better chance of saving the coach and the GM's job. Also, even if AR does end up playing well based on their history and play style, I could see a situation where both he and DJ are hurt at the same time. It's a disaster. There's no way around it. When you draft a high quarterback, a quarterback really high, and you miss, you are 99% of the time screwed. Honestly, the only examples in recent memory that have bailed people out have either been a low end free agent signing, Tannehill with Mariota. Um, I think there are probably other examples as well, but most of them are drafting people in later in the draft, either in the same draft or the following year. Cousins bailed the Redskins out when the RG3 got injured. Brock Purdy bailed the Niners out when he was drafted a year later in the seventh round. Dak Prescott, fourth round. It's a different situation, but with Tony Romo because he wasn't a draft pick. But you know what I mean. I don't understand why the Giants are focusing their quarterback search on Aaron Rodgers. He's 41, looked like a shot fighter, and he's afraid to get hit. He's also a narcissist and is controlling the Giants' operation without even being signed by the teams. Why not sign Jameis for a fraction of the price and move forward? Because the Giants, at least with Rodgers, there is some hope of like, what if we just get a throwback season? He gives us 10 good games out of 17, and we're in competition for a wild card. Even if we end up going 8-9, our season's relevant. You put Jameis on the Giants, they're winning 3 or 4 games. And I find Jameis entertaining. His quotes are funny. You know, when he's playing decent football, he's fun to watch. The Giants would not win any games with Jameis. Now, they might not win any game with Rodgers either. He could easily do the same thing and you win 3, 4 games. But there is that element of hope, right or wrong. The Panthers season is on Bryce Young's shoulders. With the Panthers offseason moves, and if Bryce Young can play like he did toward the end of last season, am I crazy to think they can compete for a wild card spot? I don't know wild card spot, but the way they look toward the end of the season with Bryce, if their defense is improved, uh, they definitely could be better. I mean, what was their final? I don't know why my thing's not charging here. I don't want my phone to die. Uh, what was their final record this year? Carolina. I guess I can just go to ESPN, NFL standings. They went 5-12, but they were playing pretty good football the last couple months. 8 wins, 9 wins would be an incredible accomplishment. 9 wins would be a pretty incredible accomplishment. Curious your thoughts on this year's edge rush class. Outside of Carter, is there anyone you have your eye on potentially becoming elite? Uh, we'll do some much more deep dives on some high end players in this draft. I would say, from a pass rushing standpoint, Abdul Carter is a pretty special pass rusher. That's why I think non quarterback, he's going to be the first player off the board. I do think Walker from Georgia, at least in my exposure watching him play, had some games. I mean, that game he had against Texas in the regular season was probably as good of a regular season game. I mean, up there with any prospect in college football. I know Tyler Warren had an incredible game against USC. Jeanty had a bunch of great games. He had a great game against Oregon. But if you watch Walker against Texas, I think Georgia had like 8 sacks. He had like three of them. He had a bunch of tackles for losses. I do think the Stewart kid from A&M, I mean, physically on paper, looks like he should be a star. 4.5 career sacks. That concerns me because I was taught you either get to the quarterback or you don't. And is there an instinctive issue with him not being able to land the guy? Because physically, he is a freak show. But we have seen a lot of guys with elite measurables and not the production at pass rusher get drafted really high and then not become good players. So that would make me really nervous. Question for the bag. One underrated aspect of Hurts Sirianni coach quarterback duo is their ability to show up and win against the best quarterbacks. As a duo, they're 2-2 versus Mahomes, 1-0 versus Burrow, Allen and Lamar, 3-0 versus Stafford, 2-1 versus Daniels. 2-0 when Hurts plays more than 2 drives. Oh, because the one loss. I hear you. These are often talked about as the top 6 quarterbacks. They also have been to 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, made the playoffs in their first year and an average roster, and had 3 different OCs and DCs in 4 years. It can't all be Howie Roseman. How do you evaluate the coach quarterback duo? Well, I mean, I don't think Howie's taking credit for like plays being called, but he's in full control of the roster. And then when you talk about the ability to like outplay other quarterbacks, Sirianni's not coaching the offense. It was the Steichen 2 years ago when they made the playoffs, and then Kellen this year. So Sirianni, does he motivate and get the team ready? You got to give him credit. The team has been ready in a lot of these big games. Don't argue there. But he doesn't pick the players and he doesn't dictate the scheme. I was talking to someone recently, and again, it's going to sound like I'm a hater. I don't like. I'm not anti Sirianni at this point. You win a Super Bowl, I tip my hat to you. But there were a lot of rumors that this guy wants a big contract extension. And in fairness, the going rate for a guy that wins a Super Bowl, let's just pick a number. It's not like Sirianni's making nothing. $6-7 million. Surely one of the lowest paid coaches in the league on his original contract. He's going to want, I don't know, 15-16 million dollars. The Eagles going to give him 15-16 million dollars. I don't know the answer. Maybe they would. Maybe they won't. It'd be fascinating to see. If you're the Commanders, would you trade your first round pick for Trey Hendrickson and also pay him $30 million a year? Uh, I'd think about it. He is. I tried to spell it in Google and I didn't even come close. A little older player. Uh, Turned into a dominant force these last 2 years. Hasn't missed a game since 22. 25 sacks. Excuse me. Bad at math. 17 and 17. So that'd be 35 sacks the last 2 years. Yeah, he's a monster. Um, yeah, I think you can think long and hard about it. I couldn't. It's not an easy decision because he's older. If he was like 27, I'd feel a little. Once you get 30, I mean, he's been in the league now since 17, and he is a guy. I mean, he's banged up second year. He's been missed a couple games here and there over the course of his career. Hang him is the like If he was a free agent, he would get so much money. It's about just giving my first round pick. Because when you give a first round pick for an older player, that first round pick, if you just hit, even if you don't hit a home run, even if you hit a double, like that's 8, 9 years of player for you. And because they won however many games, they're drafting what, 28th, that you're not paying the guy that much your first 4 years. So it's like there's an economic exercise to be had when you're talking about this. It's not an easy decision, but if he was available, first round pick, I think you would have to do it. Where do you stand on Tua? If we were being completely honest with ourselves, is this guy even a real starting quarterback in the NFL? Yeah. Okay. I would be considered a Tua hater, and he actually grew on me over the course of the last couple of years when he was getting KO'd because backup quarterbacks would come in. It was a joke. Tua's 100% a starting quarterback in the league. Like, I think in a perfect world, you pay Tua $20 million. When you pay Tua 50 or 48 or whatever the hell he's making, like, that's where you get a problem. Well, he's next quarterback up. Well, he's not nearly as good as the other guys. Starting quarterback, good player. But, like, if Baker Mayfield's making 30, he shouldn't make that. He shouldn't make five, but why can't we pay certain guys like 20? He's just, he's not going to be able to play in the cold. Obviously, the concussion thing is a big problem, and it's not his fault. Like, you don't control whether you get concussions when you get tackled, but some of these concussions have been avoidable if he, I don't know, slid. So, I respect his toughness, but at this point, he can be a little reckless when he moves around. Um, I just think he's dramatically overpaid. I mean, I think anytime you pay a guy who is never going to be a top 10 quarterback, I don't give a shit what stat you give me. Your franchise is kind of screwed. With how loaded the linemen are in this class, I don't think it would be a bad idea if the Niners trade back to 16 and 17 and still get one of the top offensive linemen or defensive linemen and add a third or fourth rounder. How would you approach the draft if you were the Niners? I love a good trade back as much as the next guy, but to trade back, you need people to trade with you. So I have a hard time seeing there be a player at 11 that is worthy of a trade back. Think about in recent memory, some trades. The Giants traded back, I think it was pick 11 with the Bears for Justin Fields, who at the time was what, the fourth quarterback in that draft? That's not this draft. So it's pretty rare that you're going to get some crazy trade at 11. I think they would have no problem going from like 11 to 15 and adding the third round pick. I'm in agreement with you. I don't think whoever is picking in the mid teens is trading up because they go, what the hell's the difference? This draft is not viewed as very good. Every player, even that like we know, the Will Campbells, Ashton Jeantys, none of these guys are a bet your life they're going to be an all pro, a pro bowler in the NFL. Banks, Mason Graham, the defensive lineman from Michigan, like all these guys could be good. But I think there is a huge variance on all these players. We have seen great drafts where it was like, these guys are going to be good players, right? The Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Waddle, Devontae Smith, right? There are drafts with position players where like, these guys are going to be good. Now, I don't know how good, but they're going to be good. I don't think this draft is viewed like that. People go, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. They should be good players. Everyone else, I can't even imagine some of the debates in these draft rooms. At the beginning of last year, I was able to successfully convert my wife into a diehard Ravens fan. She was all in. She watched every game, followed all the in season headlines, and was about as emotionally invested in the team's success as I was. We live in Houston, and she actually got us tickets to the Christmas Day game to go watch the Ravens. Her favorite players are Hamilton, Humphreys, and of course, Lamar Jackson. My wife being a fan of my favorite team is like a dream come true. We always have something to talk about or look forward to. My question is, with you getting married, do you agree that sharing the fandom and passion of your favorite team may not necessarily be a requirement, but it's without a doubt a bonus? Uh, yeah, I mean, I do I like want to break down the Niners offseason plans with Maria? I mean, probably not. But do we bullshit and laugh about Instagram? And she really likes the 49ers. And she's invested in all the players and seeing Dre Greenlaw and Funga and all these guys leave, rattled her, use check back. She's asking questions. Yeah, it's cool. Uh, but like beside football, she doesn't care at all about couldn't pay her to watch a basketball game. I mean, take her to a baseball game. It's like maybe a hot dog and a beer. She'd be ready to go in the third inning. Uh, she knows way more about golf just because I have it always on television, but there you'd have to pay her a lot of money to watch hours of a golf tournament. I mean, March Madness, she won't watch a dribble. I mean, she just doesn't really care. So you could argue that that she does like football. It is cool. I actually got a text this morning from a guy named Andy Reid, who had said, congrats on getting married. He said he was proud of me, and I said essentially, thank you. She's a big football fan, and he essentially said, well, that's a must. And it is true. Like when you do something like I do, and football is a huge part of my life, it definitely is cool that she likes it. But I would say that even if, let's say she liked the Packers instead of the Niners or the Cowboys, like that'd be cool enough for me. I get in your situation that like if you're watching, the game every week, especially if you don't live in that area, uh, it's definitely have cool to have her invested. And it's almost like sharing a show, right? When you share a good series or something to watch with someone else, like you get invested with them and it's something to talk about. So a football team, year round, the moves, people get injured, the controversial shit that happens. It's definitely, it makes for easy conversation. Been listening to you for a few years now. Love your takes and how you approach each topic with a different viewpoint from most. I'm currently a college basketball coach, so loving this time of year, college basketball, but also always keep up with the NFL news and notes. Do you think the NIL and transfer portal will impact a player's draft stock? For example, if a player leaves a program every year for whatever reason, do you think that will impact how coaches view him? I know for us in recruiting, if a player goes to four different high schools in 4 different years, it's a major red flag. Thanks and congrats on the wedding. Uh, I talked to some buddies about this fall. I actually think the NIL is easier because I remember a question when I was involved in it. It was like, how will a kid handle money? It's an impossible question to answer. If I met every human being at 25 that is not rich and said, this person is going to become rich, how will they handle money? You'd have to do a pretty big deep dive on these human beings. And even then, it's an educated guess where you have no clue because most human beings, it can derail their drive, it can change their focus, it can just expose who they really are. And I think with these guys making millions of dollars, some of these kids are making seven figures. When you go to a parking lot at Ohio State, at Texas, at SC, at any of these programs now, all the big ones, their parking lots now look like an NFL parking lot. These kids are rich. So it's like, yeah, this guy worked his ass off, was never an issue. Football, nothing changed. That would make me feel better. I actually haven't heard many stories about guys like not working as hard. Because I bet if they didn't work, they wouldn't work as hard with money as they didn't have money. Now, I do think where it exposes guys is like, you know, I think you used to get judged if you transferred. I don't think anyone cares because like coaches leave all the time for more money. Scouts leave to different teams for more money. I do business with different partners. We cancel a deal to go on with a new partner for more money. Isn't that business? So I would say at first, be like, oh, this guy's leaving the program. He just he can't figure it out. I don't think anyone judges that anymore. I mean, look at all the quarterbacks last year. They not only transferred programs to the smartest thing they ever did, changed their life. So I actually think there are way more positives than negatives. And I'm sure there are examples, not that I've heard of, that, a kid got 500 grand and he just didn't give a shit. But honestly, I haven't heard many of those examples. And that's the thing with football is it's really hard to kind of half-ass it, especially, especially in the games. So I think the hard part is like in the NFL, there's way more money on the line in the NFL. Because even if you get drafted in the third round, like your second contract, if you're a good player, is worth 40, 50, 60, 80, however millions of dollars. In the NIL, I'm giving you 500 grand or 800 grand, a car. It ain't NFL money. So you're still chasing, like, I don't know about you, but for me, when I have financial success, my mind always goes like, well, how do we get more? Even though like the actual tangible value of money does not like put a smile on my face, but it's just kind of the way, like, it's my scoreboard. If you get $100, how do we turn that into $1,000? You get $1,000, how do you turn that into $10,000? You get $10,000, how you 100 grand? You're kind of always chasing more. And I think the best people in most industries kind of have that mindset. I think it's definitely no different in football. So I think most people, if you talk to in the NFL with the NIL, they kind of like it. Okay, last question. Longtime listener, first time shooting for the mailbag. Since I know you have such love for The Sopranos, I was wondering if you have ever watched Breaking Bad and what your thoughts are on it. Uh, I think I've watched. I remember I tried to binge it maybe years, maybe in like 20 when there wasn't much to do, and I enjoyed it. I like the what's the show about the dude, his lawyer, who broke off and created his own show. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I would say this, like Narcos, were they the Netflix version of like the Pablo and El Chapo. I like that more than like the meth version of Bryan Cranston. Again, I wasn't anti the show, the one dude that has a chicken spot, but I guess my overall take would be whenever I see people say that Breaking Bad, and I would say the same thing about Mad Men as like the greatest shows of all time. Yeah, not for me. I'm not anti those shows. I've watched, I would say, a decent amount of both of them, but I would say neither made me feel the way that I see them, I would say, consistently described by the public. Um, and you could argue, I mean, there are parts of The Sopranos that are pretty boring as well. I just like mob shows. I guess the story with Breaking Bad, I don't know. Not that I wasn't hooked, it just wasn't something about it. I can't really put my finger on it. Not anti Breaking Bad. Not like a. I think it's like sucks, but it wouldn't be one of those where it's like this is my jam. Like hell, I think The Wire, which doesn't really get talked about as much anymore, uh, I think was. I mean, it's widely considered one of the best shows of all time, but like blows away Breaking Bad. And I know that's different, but if you told me right now you got to rewatch one, I feel like I've seen The Wire like 3 or 4 times. I would rather watch that than Breaking Bad. Okay, adios, people. See ya.